Welcome to Season 2 of the Excel podcast. Join your host Kevin Selwood as he talks to a variety of people with useful and interesting things to say about all things to do with instructing and driver training. Throughout the series, there will be a mixture of local personalities from the driver training industry in the Exeter and Torbay areas, as well as nationally acclaimed trainers. Episodes include informative discussions regarding all aspects of running your business, as well as opportunities to find out a bit more about each interviewee. We hope you enjoy the show.
Good morning or afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this bonus edition of the Excel podcast. I'm really pleased to have with me today a familiar voice from previous podcasts, and that's Phil Cowley. Hi, Phil.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for giving us a bit of time to do this. The reason for this particular edition is to just have a little bit of a chat about the storm that's brewed this week regarding the consultation, I'll say that in guardedly, that the DVSA have just published, and actually what they're now going to be proposing to do, or what ministers are proposing to do following this, in an attempt to try and reduce test waiting times. So we'll wander through one or two bits on this in a moment. Just to give a context to it, this consultation went out earlier this year, was it, Phil, I suppose?
Yeah, it was a few months ago, yeah.
A few months, yeah. And just under 21,000 people responded to it, of which 70% were learner drivers or riders. 14% were ADIs or driving schools, which I've worked out to be just under 3,000. And there's just under 40,000 ADIs on the register. So
yeah.
it's
about half of the course. On those sort of consultations.
Yeah, the interesting thing is there's this change.org petition that's come up in the last couple of days, and I've noticed that there are just about 6,000 signatures on that already. So that's okay. twice as many ADIs as actually took part in the consultation.
So I did see a post on Facebook asking like why, if you didn't respond to the thing, why. And I think the main consensus was, what's the point? Because we're not going to get listened to. And to be fair, if you look at this report and the stats, you can see that argument, because actually some of the things they've gone for are completely against the result of the question. So I sort of get that, and that sort of kind of despondency. For me, I would always fill it in, because I don't think you have the right. It's a bit like voting, isn't it? I don't think you have the right to complain unless you've been taken part. So yeah, I would always put my opinion forward. And actually, if 40,000 driving instructors voted against a particular measure, and then they put that measure in, then there's a much stronger argument for us to say, what are you doing? Whereas actually, let's say even if all 3,000 instructors that filled it in said, we don't want this, the DVSA can still say, well, that's actually less than 10% of the industry. So that's the issue. We need everyone to be saying, this is what we think, so that we then have some pull.
Yeah, I think that have you listened to the instructor podcast with Terry Cook and Bob Morton this week yet? Yeah. Yep. Bob doesn't hold back, does he? In that.
No, I've never heard Bob so animated, to be honest. He's normally pretty kind of chilled about these things, and yeah, he went for it.
Yeah, but even he's getting a bit despondent about it. And I did like the sort of analogy he did about the fact that instructors fail their standards check because they keep doing the same thing and don't adapt their lessons, and yet the DVSA keep doing the same thing with these consultations and getting the same result, and people just not bothering. And you know, I think there is an element to this, that there needs to be some more inward looking from the DVSA about what's happening and why they're getting such limited response. And you know, I totally agree with these people who are now throwing their hands up and saying, why should we bother? You're not listening to us.
Yeah. But I think, like I said, I think maybe that is the case of the fact that they're not listening because there wasn't a big enough response.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's like it's chicken and egg sort of kind of thing, isn't it? Sort of like which I
Absolutely.
don't know which comes first, sort of kind of thing. So yeah, maybe they're looking at it and seeing, well, this is only 10% of instructors' sort of kind of opinions, so they can ignore it. Whereas I don't think they can ignore 100% of instructors'
No.
opinions, and
No.
so. Well, they might try. You never know. I do think that there are certain things that they're going to change regardless. And in which case, don't ask us.
Yeah.
If you're going to
Yes.
change it
Well,
anyway, don't ask the question.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's like,
There were some things in that consultation I think were fairly irrelevant, like why do we need to consult about the digital passes? You know,
yeah,
just do it.
Yeah, do it, sort that out. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, so I don't know if you wanted to move on to the actual points or
You read my mind.
nice.
Yeah, so let's have a look at some of these, and I'd say that they were there, or that they are being put in purportedly to reduce test waiting times. One thing that strikes me is the irony of the fact that we're recording this on April the 1st. But it's not a joke. So the first one is that this proposal, or looks like it's going to happen anyway, to extend the waiting time that you can take another test if you have failed from 10 to 28 working days. And the spin that's been put on this, if you read the consultation, at 30.4% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed with this. Now, my maths suggests that, or my spin on it would put it round the other way, 69.6% disagreed or strongly disagreed. It's 13.8% strongly agree, 44% strongly disagree. It's
Makes no sense.
No, but
Yeah.
it's how much difference is that going from 10 days to 28 days going to make?
It's yeah. I think there's a few things there. I think like one, again, it goes back to why ask the question if they're going to ignore the answer, because you can't go 30% agreed being a good thing. Like imagine if that was any vote for a politician or anything like that, you would just be like, no, that guy didn't win. So it makes no sense from that perspective. For me, again, it maybe is just one of those things that if they wanted to do it, don't ask the question. If they think that's going to make a difference, then just make the change. But I don't know if it will make a difference. I can see where I can actually a little bit see where they're coming from with this, where their logic is that they're trying to stop and they're trying to stop people going test, and just keep coming until they pass, basically. And that's a good idea. And I think maybe sometimes from instructors we forget, because I would expect that most instructors who are upset with this are the sort of instructors that would also manage their pupils not to do that. And I think we forget that there are people there that they're either with instructors that don't care about that, or also don't have an instructor full stop. So we're maybe forgetting about those people in the DVSA and maybe seeing those people just turning up for tests.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think they're trying to prevent that a little bit. I'm not like the idea is that they get extra training. At the moment, it's not a problem anyway, because good luck for you if you're going to get a test in 10 days' time anyway.
20, or even 28 days.
Yeah, I know. So I don't know if I'm fully against this. I think the idea of it. I get there are going to be pupils who just have that moment and actually in reality could have turned up 10 days late. Could turn up tomorrow and pass it. Yeah. But actually, is it bad that they go and get extra training anyway? Is that a bad thing? Like, because can we not just make them a better driver and a safer driver anyway? So I'm always for making people like improve their driving. So I'm not fully against this one. I can see their logic. I don't think it will have the effect they want, but I can see the logic.
To me, 28 days, 4 weeks. It's if you could get a test in that time is not a problem.
No, it's not a
So,
huge. I don't think it'll make a massive effect to our training and
no,
stuff. Yeah,
no.
I wish they'd get rid of the working days bit. That's the only thing, because now I think to work out 28 working days and how many Saturdays and
Oh yeah,
Sundays are in there and stuff,
yes, yeah.
and how many does Saturday count and stuff like that. It's
And they've been doing tests on Sundays in some places anyway, haven't they?
I know. So now, what is a working day? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just tell me how many days it is, and then
yeah,
I can calculate. Because the amount of times
yeah,
I've gone to book a test and gone, is this going to work? Like, are they past the 10 days sort of thing? So yeah, just get rid of the working days. But
yeah. Talking of working days, is I suppose the next part of this is the fact that the cancellation period is going to change from you can cancel without losing the test fee from 3 working days ahead to 10. Yes, it is 10. So you've got to work it out again, haven't you, with the Sundays 10 working. At least they do tell you what the last day to cancel is. when
yeah,
you do your test.
there is that on the email. Although sometimes they put that. I always find they put that the wrong way round, and I get I've got confused before that with that. I've turned up on the cancellation date before, which is okay because that means the test is in 3 days' time. But I've just got the 2 dates wrong before and turned up on the wrong day. Um, this one's another interesting one. Again, I don't think it will have a huge effect on waiting times.
No.
I can sort of see where they're coming from. It does. I found it frustrating that sometimes cancellations come up and they're like 2 days and trying to get the pupil and the instructor available, and also going, actually, there's a test available, but ideally I wanted you to have 2 or 3 more lessons before then. Now we can't plan that. Whereas if it is in 10 days' time, you can plan that a little bit. So I see the logic there. I've heard the argument as well that obviously that might mean more no-shows because people are going to be within that period and go, well, what's the point? I'm going to lose my fee anyway.
Yeah.
From my point of view, I think that comes from the mindset of that we currently have 3 days. And I think if it changes to 10 days, people just make that decision earlier. It's something I've always thought that why are we cancelling tests a week before the test anyway? Like, if you've got a pupil who's not ready, like, why are you making that decision 1 week before the test? Like, you should know that coming up and be feeding it in. So I think it hopefully will encourage people to manage it a little bit more.
Yes.
Work it a bit earlier. So I'm not weirdly not against this one either. I'm going to have people screaming at your
percentages.
Yeah.
The percentages for and against this one are virtually 50-50 as well. So I think people are fairly ambivalent on this. Yeah. So
I don't think it'll make a huge difference. And my biggest issue is I don't think either of these will change the waiting list times, and that's what they've tried to sell.
Yes.
That is the biggest concern. I'm okay with it being a longer cancellation period.
And I think this comes back to what Bob was talking about with Terry Cook. The DVSA need to look at themselves and the fact that they're losing examiners. Why are they losing them? You know, what's the pay like? You know, you get a number of learners every now and then say to them, why don't you become an examiner? And I just look at them and say, as if they're mad.
Yeah. They're losing them in droves.
Yeah.
They're losing examiners in droves because they're all seeing that the grass is greener on the instructor side at the moment. And
who wants to work for an organisation that changes your terms and conditions so drastically, makes you go here, or can make you go here, there and everywhere at your own expense? And, all right, there's sick pay, there's holiday pay, but the basic pay is nothing to write home about at all.
I think we were talking about it on our team meeting that we had, and I think we've talked about it in the past actually when stuff like this has come up, that the instructors they need to do they need more examiners, quite simply need more examiners. And we've said this in the past about the test should be more expensive, because that would pay for more examiners, and it would also do what they're trying to do here with the whole 10-day thing, I think, and the 30-day thing. They're trying to prevent people being a bit blasé about going and having a go. And that is, I think, sorry, we're getting a bit of interference here, aren't we, with the, and I think it's one of those things. I think it's just a case of the test will pay for it, and it will also prevent people doing it. My thoughts were that that's not overly going to happen, because it's one of those things that you're charging people for more, and people don't like that, and that doesn't get votes. So politicians don't like to do stuff like that. That's the thing. It's not a vote winner, is it?
The test fee hasn't got. Is this test fee going up? Because there was something about it going from £62 to £62.90, wasn't there? What is the point of that? You know,
should be at least £100.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
And that makes people take it a bit more seriously. Not that we should be like charging people for the like, shouldn't be the reason. They should take it seriously anyway. But what that would do is allow them to pay examiners what they're worth, and increase the amount of examiners they have, and create a better service. So you're charging more, but then they would have a better service.
Yeah, and you know, the morale amongst the examiners would go up as well. You know, that's not exactly great. Absolutely. And you can understand sometimes you get an examiner who's a little bit crabby. Well, I think the pay and conditions that they're getting, I think sometimes I'll be getting out of bed thinking, oh God, not another day. But it's roughly, I read somewhere yesterday, it's roughly 400,000 tests a quarter. So if you put it up to £100, God, how much is that? So what, 1.6 million per quarter, about £6.5 million a year extra that they'd have to boost the pay up and make it more attractive.
No, 100%.
Right. Moving on, the next thing on consultation was about collecting better data about driving instructors, basically, in a paraphrase. And the main thing here is making instructors have to display their badge on test. And 54% of people agreed with that. And in fact, about 54% of driving instructors agreed with it as well. I've never personally seen the point of not displaying my badge. I've never wanted to remove it, and it makes me wonder why people ever actually do it. And I know why they do it, but it's just not something I would do, because hand on heart, I don't think I've ever taken anybody to test who I don't think I'm confident that we have a pretty good chance we should be passing.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I've never ever taken my badge out of the window. 17 years. So it's just, it's like I suppose forcing people gets a bit, it becomes a bit sort of kind of like, I don't know, but we shouldn't have to force people. Is the problem? It should just be done. I'm not against forcing people to do it, to be honest. I think it should be the case, and if it's not the case, then why? Like, I suppose that you've got two choices. You either make it legislation that you have to display your badge, or you become stricter with the instructors that regularly don't display their badge, and find out why, and what's happening there. So I suppose they're the two things. Like, it needs to be fixed where it is an issue. And it's more a case of which route do you go down? And I think they do already. Like, they've already said if you're not displaying your badge, they're going to send you out for standards check. So, so they've already kind of got something in place there anyway for that. So for me, it's one of those. I think this is probably why the vote's like that, because I think you're one of these things. Like if it's just a non-issue for me, sort of kind of thing. I would take my back, and I don't care if they make me, because I do it anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
I wonder how it might open the gates, though, to them forcing us to do other stuff. That's the other thing. Yeah. If they find, that worked, and then becoming a bit too bossy.
Yeah, and also I'd be interested that how will the mechanism work if somebody isn't displaying their badge? Somewhere along the line, somebody's got to collect that data and then go and haul them over the coals and all this sort of thing. It's
You've
a
also
bit
got
like
the issue with the fact. You've also kind of got the issue with the fact that people can turn up in their own car.
Yes.
And how they legislate for that sort of kind of thing. So it's like it almost feels a bit like one rule for the others and one rule for sort of becomes like a bit tricky with that. You probably find more instructors not taking pupils to test rather than taking them and taking their badge out. They just won't take them to test. So which I suppose is a good thing, but then they'll turn up in their own car.
Yes. And then moving on to the next thing about giving learner drivers better information about driving instructors. And this often opens up a can of worms, doesn't it? About people at the moment get their test data from the DVSA and find that it is markedly different to the reality of the tests they've done, and how accurate will this data be? And to me, there's a little bit like the argument with Ofsted, that there's 4 categories there, and it's a one-word statement, and your test pass rate is just what it is, without much context. You know, if you've got somebody who basically specialises in people with educational needs, the chances are that, you know, I'm saying this without any statistical data to back me up at all, but it's likely that people may find it harder to pass a test, and so their data could look much worse than somebody else. So you know, what is the quality of the data and how accurate is it is one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I to be fair, I just don't think this is the DVSA's job to be deciding who is and who isn't a good a driving instructor to go with. And also, again, I think they've already done this a little bit with the standards, the way that they're bringing people standards checked, but it brings people back to this idea that everything is about the driving test, whereas in reality, it should be about like asking your questions, instructors, about do you do post-test training, or not after the test. I mean, like, do you train me to drive after the test, sort of thing, and like what type of training do you do, what syllabus do you have, or what are your lessons going to be like, what extra CPD have you done, that sort of kind of thing would be far better way of but then that's down to, I don't know, market forces really, isn't it? It's sort of like people marketing themselves to do that. I don't think that is the DVSA's job to bring it down to this one stat. And I can't. Yeah, that's not. I'm not okay with that one. And my pass rate's fine, so it's not that I'm worried about my pass rate being published. I just don't think, I don't want someone to come to me because I have a good pass rate. I want them to come to me because of the type of lessons that I deliver. And how does that work? How does that work with like a driving school as well, actually? So, like, when we get an inquiry, they're not necessarily inquiring for, well, sometimes they ask for a particular instructor, but most of the time they just want to come to the school. I suppose we have an average pass rate as a school, but it's not. I just don't see how that works.
No.
So it's not their job to do that. Like, they shouldn't be our advertisers. They should be our regulators. So that it's their job. It's their job maybe, and they are doing this to say, this instructor's got a low pass rate. We need to give him a standards check or retrain him or something. That's fine, but it's not their job to then go, hey, general public, this person's got this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And do they do that with like complaints? Because I know people obviously send complaints to the DVSA. I don't think they don't publish that, do they? And that's probably more important.
Yes.
Like, if it's been proven, not just random hearsay, but if it's been proven that this instructor's received all these complaints because of these same things, why is that not going on there?
Yes.
If they're going to go down that route.
Yeah. So it's far too bold a statement to say this person's got a 40% pass rate or whatever, and then are they going to give that information out in the context of what the national or local test centre pass rate is.
Yeah.
There's so many different things you can do with data as well. That it just, having come
And
from
I don't get how this is then going to also go to what their ultimate goal behind all of this is, to reduce the waiting time.
Yes.
And I think they sort of forgetting this, that if just had more examiners, it would reduce the waiting time.
Yes.
But I get they're trying to. I suppose in their heads is, if they're allowed to publish pass rates, their idea would be that all instructors would strive for a higher pass rate, and therefore it would increase the pass rate. Now, when I first started at BSM, we had a system actually where you got bonuses based on your pass rates.
Oh yeah.
Which I loved because I used to get loads of extra money. But the goal behind because BSM weren't going to give out extra money for fun. Their goal is if they offered these incentives, the idea would be that it would increase the pass rate across the whole company, so they could advertise a high pass rate. And what actually happened was the instructors that had high pass rates and got loads of extra money, and the ones that had low pass rates had low pass rates. It didn't change anything. So they took the scheme away. And I think that's what would happen in this scenario. It wouldn't change anything. Instructors who've got high pass rates would keep high pass rates, and ones who would have low pass rates would have low pass rates. It just would not change. The only way you change those is by training, and that's what they're doing with the standards check system.
And a lot of people are getting uptight about the standards check as well, and the triggers, and it's trying to remind people that there's 4 triggers, and you've got to trigger 3 of them, not just one.
I think even within that, my guess, and I don't know this, but my guess is that there are people who are triggering it and still not getting called up, because there are people who are triggering it harder, basically. So you've still got to be in that sort of like lower percentage of triggering it. And it's one of those things. And I think it is, like, I suppose the DVSA are just calling you up for standards check. The idea then behind that is that you go and get extra training before the standards check. I suppose that's their thought process, not whether people do that or not. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting listening to Bob on the instructor podcast about people saying, "Oh, I scored 30." I've even had somebody not long ago on a part 3 fail on 31 because of the risk assessment element. And Bob saying, they said, "Oh, almost passed." He said, "Well, actually, no, you haven't, because if you'd almost, but the examiner, if the examiner felt that you were worthy of going on the register, they would have found those marks."
Yeah, I had one about a year and a half ago, I'd say, who actually got a pass. So I think it was 32, but failed on risk management. Yeah. And I said to them, the examiner is making a point here. He's saying, overall, you are good enough, but that incident wasn't basically, and it was a one-off. It was a one-off incident that didn't get handled properly. And it was unsafe, basically. But he said, actually, what he's saying is the rest of the lesson was satisfactory, but that moment wasn't, and therefore I can't pass you. And so they tell a story with their results, basically.
We're basically there to keep them safe. Let's get the learner doing as much of that as possible, but at the end of the day, we have ultimate responsibility, and if we don't keep it safe, it's very similar to the one. It's a one-off thing. The learner kept going towards a lady and a child who were crossing, or trying to cross the road down by Lidl's in Marsh Barton, and the learner just kept crawling forwards, and the lady with her child wasn't sure whether they were stopping or not. So he said, you just needed to handle it better. And he even said, even if you'd said something about it afterwards, he'd have been happy. But the fact that you didn't say anything at all. Anyway, that's getting off topic a little bit.
I know.
So I don't want to keep you too long. The other things that were on there are the ones that I think we said that why are they even consulting on this, about the different ways they're going to check people's eyesight and not just do it with a car registration plate or in daylight, and the one on digital test certificates, which
it just makes sense. I don't remember being consulted on the pass certificates being made smaller, or even when they swapped over from giving, like when because they used to give back the licenses and now they take the licenses. I don't remember being a consultation on that because we don't care. Like, it's more efficient to do it.
Yeah, quite.
Basically.
Yes, yeah. Who wants a bit of paper these days? I don't even want a bank card anymore. If I can pay by my phone, there's no bank card details on there. There's no security number on there. If we can do it digitally, then there's no photograph with a test certificate with the license details on there to scratch out before you post it online.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And it's where do we go from here with trying to do anything? And a lot of people will throw their hands up and say, well, nowhere, because they're going to do it anyway. It's interesting, again, going back to what Bob Moulton was saying, that the only way that you'll ever get anything to change is to contact your MP, because they're the ones ultimately who have the influence. How many people are going to do that?
I agreed with him about that, with the not so much about the whole changing the waiting times and the times it takes to have a test, because I just, like, it is what it is. It will become the new norm, and we'll handle it and we'll manage it as we go. But I think particularly for the publishing your data and that aspect of it, I think that's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down.
Yeah.
And so I think that sort of thing. That one was quite way down the list of what they didn't say they were going to do that one, did they?
Yeah, that's right.
But certainly, if it becomes a thing, then I think it should be acted upon, and that your MPs is probably the way forward with that. But it feels like a lot of it feels a bit like they're just trying to put band-aids on a open wound. And they need to get some examiners, and they need to keep their examiners that they've got. It's sort of just. It sort of feels like the NHS losing nurses and fixing it by changing the waiting times in the rooms and stuff. It's just like, you need more nurses, you need more of the people, but you've got to pay them right to get them in. And actually, I think if you think about the NHS argument, you can't. That money's got to come from somewhere. Whereas actually with the DVSA argument, they are charging for a service, so charge more. So like, if you were running a business and you were going, we can't afford to pay our staff, we need to increase our prices. It's just makes no sense.
If there was an alternative to the DVSA running driving tests and so on, then I imagine the DVSA would go out of business fairly quickly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I sort of kind of get that their hands are tied sometimes with certain things and things like that. And I think actually something they mentioned, like you said, they mentioned on the Instructor podcast was, and I've had the same experience, that whenever I've heard someone from the DVSA talk or spoken to someone from the DVSA, whether that's a local examiner or someone higher up, they all seem to be like working hard towards the right goals and stuff, and they all seem passionate about it, and and I've always sort of been impressed by them. But something about, even like going right to the top with Lovejoy Ryder, I think when I've heard her talk, she seems passionate, she says all the right things, but there's something about the organisation and the process that just doesn't come out of their communications or their decisions. So there's some sort of disconnect there between what they're saying and their passion, I suppose, versus the actual stuff that happens. There's a huge disconnect, and I think obviously I've listened and spoke to them, and whereas I think the majority of the instructors maybe don't go and listen to those sort of kind of things or speak to them in that sense. So maybe they're seeing is that communication and that stupid decisions and things like that. So you can see how they would become disillusioned with the DVSA.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. I was lucky enough to actually speak to Lovejoy Ryder last November about doing this Ask the Examiner podcast. Don't ask about that. I'll start ranting about it. And she was so enthusiastic. Well, I will rant about it in a minute. She was so enthusiastic about it. Immediately she said, well, let's get Mark Wynne doing it, the chief examiner. I thought, whoa, slow down. I wasn't expecting that. And here I am at the beginning of April. and I am no further forward. Well, I am a bit further forward, but to get the press office, to get anybody to come back to me, oh my God, I'm beginning to think, do I really want to bother with it now? Because I've got so many other people lined up anyway that, and half the questions are out of date now as well. But it is this enthusiasm, and the sound bites are great. And then, as you say, then the actual reality turns out to be, really? Are you listening to us? And it seems like you're not. And are you ever going to listen to us? And if you're not, then we're all going to give up contributing. But,
definitely.
Anyway,
yeah.
on that cheery note, I've kept you long enough, I think. We can throw this out, throw this bomb into the podcast arena and see what response, reaction, if any, comes. Perhaps with the sort of percentage that comes back, if we get 10% reaction, then we're doing well.
Well, it's okay, because if only 10% come back to us, we can just ignore them anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. I'm all for that. Yeah, Phil, thanks ever so much for doing this. I'm ever so grateful to you, and catch you next time.
Yep, no worries. Thanks, bye.
Go ahead. Cheers.